All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're doing more than just looking at schools. We're launching a full-on investigation into the American education system. We're going to peel back the layers and figure out why a system designed for the 19th century is having such a hard time preparing students for the 21st.
And you know, every good investigation has to start with a central mystery. Here's ours. The United States spends more money per student than almost any other developed nation on Earth. And yet, when you look at the results, our performance is consistently average. So the question is, where is all that money going? And why isn't it buying success? Let's follow the clues. Okay, so this chart, this gets right to the heart of the mystery. You can see how the US stacks up on performance tests against countries like Japan and Estonia. We consistently outspend them by a lot, but their students are consistently outperforming ours. And this isn't just a tiny gap we're talking about. It's a massive failure of return on investment. It's one of the first things our investigation has to explain. To solve this thing, our first clue actually takes us back in time, way back. We need to look at the original blueprint for our entire education system, a blueprint that, you'll see, has barely changed in over 150 years.
So get this. Back in the 1830s, a guy named Horace Mann, who's often called the father of American education, he travels to Prussia, sees their school system, and absolutely falls in love with it. Now why? Well, because it was perfectly designed to create obedient, punctual workers for the new factories of the Industrial Revolution. Think about it. Students are grouped by age, not ability. They move from task to task when a bell rings. They're taught through rote memorization. It's literally an assembly line for people. And the craziest part? We're still using it.
And that leads us to this, a massive, fundamental mismatch. The original goals of the system were all about creating conformity and reliability. But the skills we desperately need now, they're the exact opposite. Critical thinking, creativity, the ability to adapt to constant change. Our system is trying to build a Ford Model T when the world needs a self-driving electric car. Okay, so let's move on to our next clue. If the foundation itself is outdated, you can bet the structure built on top of it has some serious problems. It's become rigid and flexible, and that's thanks to something we can call the uniformity trap. Ever since the Department of Education was created in 1980, federal funding has become this incredibly powerful carrot and stick. If states want the money, they have to comply with federal mandates. And this has forced incredibly diverse communities, we're talking rural farming towns and major tech hubs, into the exact same educational box. And what gets squeezed out? Innovation, local control, the ability for a community to tailor education to their kids. And the ultimate consequence of all this uniformity is what some call the testing industrial complex. When all that funding is tied to standardized test scores, guess what becomes the most important thing? The test. The curriculum becomes the test. And teachers are forced to teach to the test, which means we're no longer measuring if a student actually understands a concept. We're just measuring their stamina for filling in bubbles. Now, remember that big mystery from the beginning? Where is all the money going? Well, this number is a giant piece of the puzzle. What do you think it is? It's not teacher pay, and it's not money for new classroom tech. This is the administrative bloat. Look at this. Since the 1970s, the number of teachers has grown by about 60%. Okay, that makes sense, but the number of administrators has exploded by over 230%. The money is getting soaked up by a growing bureaucracy in the front office instead of actually making its way into the classrooms where the learning happens. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, okay, fine, public schools are a mess, the answer must be private school. Well, our investigation found a pretty big twist. There's a parallel crisis happening there, too. And this just goes to show that the problem is way deeper than just public versus private. See, the business model for most of these elite private schools is almost completely dependent on tuition. And to attract those high-paying families, they get locked into what's been called an amenities arms race, building shinier gyms, fancier science labs, 5-star cafeterias, you name it. And this creates a really vicious cycle. To pay for the amenities, they have to raise tuition. To justify the high tuition, they have to maintain this air of exclusivity. It essentially turns education into a luxury good. And we're now hitting a breaking point where even upper-middle-class families are getting totally priced out, which is creating a sustainability crisis for the schools themselves. So we've followed the clues. We've got an outdated blueprint, a rigid structure built on top of it, and even the alternatives are becoming unsustainable. So now it's time to solve the case. How do we stop trying to patch up the old system and start designing one for this century?
So here's a blueprint for what real change could look like. First, decentralization. We have to break that uniformity trap and let local communities innovate again. Second, we need serious funding reform, moving away from property tax models so that a kid's future isn't determined by their zip code. Third, that 230% administrative bloat, it needs to go on a diet so we can redirect all that money from the bureaucracy back into the classroom. And finally, all of this serves one big overarching goal, a shift to a truly student-centered learning model.
So what does a student-centered model actually look like? Well, one of the most promising ideas is called the mastery model. Imagine this. Instead of that old factory conveyor belt where everyone moves together at the same speed, students learn at their own pace. They only move on to the next topic after they can prove they've truly mastered the last one. It's such a simple shift, but it changes everything. It replaces the factory bell with individual potential. It's education tailored to the student, not the clock. So, our investigation makes it pretty clear. We are trying to navigate the complex world of the 21st century with a map that was drawn in the 19th. The factory bell is still ringing, but the world it was built for is long gone. The evidence is all there. So the only question left is this one. Is it time to stop trying to fix this broken system and finally start building a new one?